Oh yeah, here we are, another color commentary live coming to you right here for you. This is color commentary, colorful conversations by colorful people about Christianity, culture, and race. Man, it's good to be in here again. My name is Marcus Lloyd, and with me, as always, is Mr. Antwizzle Malone. What's happening, Antoine?
And twizzle for shizzle. What's
What's
up,
up, man?
everybody? How are y'all on this glorious Friday?
That's right. Another glorious live Friday. It is a beautiful weather right now, at least in the Dallas metroplex area.
That's what they say in Dallas. Yeah, they say
Yeah.
it's beautiful.
Yeah.
No, it's nice. I hadn't been outside yet though. So
Oh yeah.
have
Yeah,
you
that's nice.
gone outside today?
Yeah. I roll through. When I get my kids out in the morning,
Oh,
I got to
yeah.
walk out the door, so I go out there, and then I've been monitoring because yesterday and we were talking about this on the call. Yesterday I got up early and went outside because it was such a nice day. This is like my favorite time of the year, right? Because I can be out on my front porch. My front porch is like the only place I even hesitate to call it this. Is the only place that's mine in the whole, and not even in the house, but around the house where I can
Yeah.
go.
It's like your kind of sanctuary. Yeah.
That's it. Because every place in the house is taken by somebody. It's claimed. It's been licked. You know what I mean? Like, so I sit out on the front porch, and like early in the morning when I get up to read or whatever, I'll go sit out on the front porch, and I'll take in the nature and have a good time. So yesterday I was out on the front porch and I saw this little bluebird with like a twig in its mouth, and I was like, oh, it's that time of year. Where is this fool going to be building a nest? It's going to be like in my, like, where is it going to be?
In your
You know,
chimney. That's
in my
what you're
chimney.
saying.
That's what I was thinking. But I saw it fly up into the tree. I have this oak tree in my front yard,
Yeah.
and there was another bluebird up there, and I could see that they had just begun the creation of a little bird's nest. And so I sat out there till probably 12:30 working, just watching the process of them building this nest. It was fascinating. So this morning when I I was out there last night again and I saw it a little bit, but it was dark. And so this morning I went out when when the boys were going off to catch the bus, and I
Yeah.
went out there to monitor and see what they were doing up there, what the process was. And it was full. I think it's fully finished.
It's
They got a
done.
good spot, like it's covered from above and whatever. So I think there's a bird in there right now.
That's
It's
wild.
hard to see, but
We'll see. Eventually, a bird is coming. The promise
yeah,
of bird has been made. Our backyard is filled with the squirrel. All the
yes.
squirrels have planted their nuts, and so they're all blooming. So we have these
These little
20 or
trees.
so, yeah, like just
I forgot about those.
little things.
Whatever they
Which
are.
are you supposed to go out there and like pull those up, or is it fine just that the
Just to mow
mower
over
is
'em?
going to mow over it? Yeah.
I think we just kinda mow over those things. I don't actually pull
I'm
'em up.
sure
But
there's
I'm not
somebody.
the person to ask for that
I'm
kind
about
of
to
thing.
say somebody's gonna be like, "No, Antoine, you need to get out there and need to pull each one of those up because X, Y, Z." And
Right.
I don't know why I
Hey,
asked the question because
this is a
I
live
already
show.
know
It's a live show.
it's a
So
live
if
show.
there's
Yeah,
somebody on the
technically
comments.
somebody can just come in and say it now. But here's the deal, though. I don't know why I asked the question because I already know what I am and am not going to do about it. And they're going to say,
"What am I supposed to do?"
"What am I supposed to do?" And
I ain't doing it.
I'm not going out there to pick
No.
out each one of those. So
You know what?
we
If you need them, I'm always looking for the boys extra stuff to do. So I
just
may, send them over and
just
like,
send them over.
"Hey."
It won't take two of them. Won't take them that long. It wouldn't take me that long. I just
That's the
don't
thing.
want to
It
do
doesn't have to take them long. It's just enough that they're bothered by doing it. That's
it.
the
Yeah.
reward for me.
There you
It's
go.
just,
You just
I just gotta get them like
annoy the boys. Check
just
that
well,
out.
it's just it's there's very few. They don't do a lot of stuff to be punished, but when you have to punish them, you have to create something, clever to do. So I just want to figure it out. So looks like
There it
Julie
is.
is all in on pulling them up.
Yeah, she says, "What's up, Julie? Good.
Good to
Is
see
it
you,
good
Julie.
morning? I guess we're still in morning. Top.
Yeah, she's here in the Dallas area. So
Yeah. So good morning. Thanks for joining us. Yeah, that seems. If I had to guess, if I asked my wife, she'd probably be like, "Yeah, we probably should pull those up."
well, it's like a life lesson, right? You know what I mean? Are you gonna dig up the issues, or are you just gonna just mow over them?
Or are
Because if
you
you
just
see
going
my
more
yard,
over?
Yeah, if you see my yard,
we
like,
we would
before
just keep mowing over these life
absolutely.
issues.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the opposite
We're
of
gonna have
how
a
you're supposed
traumatic.
to feel.
It's gonna be a trauma filled backyard.
It's the positive piece versus negative piece, right?
That's it. Yeah.
The negative piece is I know there's turmoil underneath the surface of this
I'm
yard that
just
is
gonna
going to throw
keep
my head up, but
mowing it.
instead of
Yeah.
dealing with it and going rooting it out, I'm gonna keep mowing over it as like it's nothing. It's the race problem. This is how we transition. Like
Is
it's
there
the
too many
race.
people who feel like I do that it doesn't matter what people say? They're just going to
You're
mow it
just gonna mow over
anyway.
it. Yeah.
Uh,
Again, that
maybe,
that
maybe that's
translates
what it
into
is.
some of the issues we have in the race conversation as well.
Maybe. What's up, everybody? I see we got a few more people. I know we have a lot of sort of silent listeners, and so you guys, some of you don't like to type in or say anything, and that's fine. But if you fancy a hello, then we enjoy a
Say
nice
hello.
little hello if you're going to do that today. Anyway, yeah, this is Color Commentary Live. So again, for those who are not live, who are listening to this afterward, who will listen to this afterward, you guys got to come in, join in with us. It's usually the last Friday of the month. So
Right, last Friday of the month, 11:30 Central Time,
yeah,
AM, if you will, and we jump on for a little bit and try to take topics that we see in the culture, or we have a very specific topic, or we deal with what people are talking about in the chat. Actually, all of the above usually is usually how it works out.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Today we might lean on you guys because we don't have like a whole lot of like really. Today's not a day where we're gonna come in and just like, man, we got this topic that we really just want to dig into. We have some of those coming up
yeah,
soon, but today it's kind of loose. It's kind of chill, grab bag of ideas. And so if you guys have something that you guys are thinking through or have been wanting to ask us, and maybe you haven't had the chance to, or been wanting to shoot that email and you just hadn't got to shoot it off to us, then today is a great day to jump in. So
that's
there's
right.
the invitation. There it
It is.
is.
I thought we have those questions too. I forgot to
We
go.
do have some, from the threaded live.
Uh-huh. Yeah, which is another way, obviously, that if you've been a part of some of the live stuff we do, Threaded does a community conversations, which is the third Wednesday of the month, and we do a colored commentary live, which is the last Friday of the month, and we have actually a link that we put out there in
We do.
which, in fact, do we have that on here as one of
We
our?
do. I think it's we are. I'm looking it up right now.
I was seeing if we had it on one of our little banners we could throw up there while people are watching. But anyway, so you can
Yeah,
go
I
to
got that.
weartwitter.org/questions
Questions.
with an S.
Yep.
And you can just throw anything you want in there. You know what I mean? And you can say, hey, I want you guys to talk about this at the community conversation, or I want you to talk about this for Color Commentary Live. And so that's helpful for us. We want to be a resource that helps people kind of think through the things that they're doing. And your questions actually help us to think through some of the things that we need to create to be better guides and helpmates
No
along the
doubt.
road as you do your thing and as you try to be what we like to call a community weaver out there. Those who go out and want to, bring the community together instead of tear it apart. They want to make friends instead of make points. Those kinds of things. And so we getting those questions help us, and getting interaction with the comments as well is super helpful. So check that out if you haven't seen it. We are threaded.org/questions for all of those who are on with us now, but then also who are listening.
Who are listening? Because if you're on with us now, go ahead and put it in the comment section.
Yeah, that's right. I guess so.
Like,
Right
let's kill
there.
the middleman. But
it
for the podcasters, you guys, man, you know what? We don't do a whole lot of marketing about our the podcast in our group. So I'm really excited that we have the community that we have, because we kind of just go on and it sends them invitations out. But we can always, grow. So don't hesitate to tell a friend or two about the show if it's helpful to you. Hopefully we try to create a safe space, and man, we need safe spaces to talk about tough things.
Yeah, particularly right now.
And so we're a safe space. We're trying to be safe spaces. One of the most, Marcus, I don't know if it's like this for you. One of the most frustrating things is when someone tells me that I'm angry when I'm not angry. Or when I, you know what I mean, or they're telling me, because I think I spend a lot of energy trying to have integrity in conversation.
Yep.
I don't want to have like you were talking about, this sort of false peace where you're going to act like something doesn't bother you, or you're going to act like a problem doesn't exist.
Right.
but also try to stay open minded and empathetic and try to think like the person I'm talking to may be thinking in order to make a connection. And so these are things I really work hard at.
Yeah.
And sometimes you still in the middle of all that, you still will get someone that will contact you or email you. And I know and they were like, "Ah, man, you just seem so cynical or negative." And
Sure.
I'm like, no, we're just trying to solve problems here. So we're trying to do that. We're trying to solve problems, think through things, empathize, and bring the gospel to bear to like these really tough things. So hopefully, if we're getting better at that, then tell some people. I think we can help them.
Yeah. And I
And even those emails might be helpful. They're frustrating as they are. They're helpful to me too because it helps me know, okay, maybe I'm not doing it as well as I think I am.
Well, and two, I think there's also in the conversation, it's one of the things that we're trying to help, even in the cultural sort of intelligence that we're trying to that we train through threaded, just to be able to think and recognize that the ways that people respond and react to different things can have some cultural backgrounds, but also we're human beings that that have a myriad of emotions. I think there's this expectation like that everybody's supposed to have kind of like this one emotion, this one sort of through line of how you're supposed to deal with things. But when different stimulus come into your space, like God gave you a lot of different options of emotions to have. And there may be times that that a frustration, be it a holy frustration or a justified anger, if you will, is appropriate, and the
True.
calm sort of like even keel is not appropriate for the situation. You know what I
True.
mean? If someone's choking my child, like and I'm watching it, it doesn't make sense. Like, hey, can you let me just you can take your hands off my child's neck. That would be great. That'd
Oh,
be
you had a bad day today?
oh,
Oh,
I'm
well, tell
sorry.
me about that.
Like
No,
you
I'm
gotta
gonna.
like get in there and go, well, you better get your hands off my child. You know what I mean? Like sometimes you gotta
True.
just be in that space. And I
Mm,
think that that's one of the things that really got that really came to a head in 2020, like the summer of 2020. There was so much emotion in the space, and I saw so many people of color losing their jobs, losing their voices, having to leave their spaces because um, these people who were considered to be like mild mannered, even keeled, safe, sort of people of color for predominantly white spaces were all of a sudden they were amped a bit. They were frustrated and they were angry. And they were getting kind of pulled this, hey, we don't like your tone. You seem angry, kind of things you were talking about. And in the midst of again trying to see and experience life through another person's world, if you're seeing people who look like you dying regularly on the street, there's a fear that's there, there's an anger that's there, and maybe it should be. And so you would expect to see a heightened sort of emotional state of people who really see themselves as a collective member of a group, not just an individual inside of an environment. And so
right.
those are the kinds of things you got to look at too. So I think that's not to say that we just get to fly off the handle, do whatever we want. We want to be
Right.
measured in that, and we want to do it. But we have to recognize that people are going to they're going to have emotions. They're going to be overly positive. They're going to be negative at
Yeah.
times, depending on what the weather in their life is like as well. So
Yeah.
yeah,
But
I
the
think
trippy part of that, Marcus, is like I'm not even angry. Like
well
I don't
that's the piece you're
think
frustrated. Right?
like I don't
Like
think
I get
anyone's
the
actually
emotions, but I'm not
seen me
actually showing it.
exactly. Like I don't think anyone's actually seen me angry. Like I don't think you
Oh,
may have seen me a little perturbed, frustrated a little bit, but like out of control, like or
oh,
anywhere near out of control or unhinged or whatever. Like um yeah, man. I'm like, wait a minute. If this is
right,
the thing that you're this is the level 2 of confrontation. This isn't a level 10 confrontation or the level
right,
5. I'm just confronting the issue at the
yeah.
moment. I'm not even pushing you too heavily. Anyway, so that part of it is frustrating. It's kind of and it's the thing that kind of leads to the sort of the fatigue of doing the work sometimes, whether you're having it like you and I are having it, and where we're trying to get ahead of it, we're trying to lead in this space, but learn as we lead.
Right.
And there's a fatigue with that, and then there's just the fatigue of other people, and I guess this is all part of that whole thing.
It
Yeah.
is. It is, and it's a part that we're moving through as best we can. And I'd love to hear anybody if anybody's in the chat. You know what I mean? Like, have you ever been accused of being confrontational, divisive, angry in the midst of this conversation. Love to see those things pop up. And what did you do about it? Help us out, understand that. I was in a group. I'm a part of a cohort that meets once a month. That's super fun. It's a pleasure because I get to be mentored by Brenda Salter McNeil, and love Dr. Brenda. But we were talking about different things, and one of the things as I was in the group, I was realizing about myself is the way in which my upbringing, not necessarily with my parents, but my upbringing in society, how it has um, how it has determined the way in which I see the use of my voice. There's a part of me, because I've been in entertainment. I'm an entertainer, right? When I'm on stage, people are absolutely okay with my voice and my energy and all the different emotional ways in which I maneuver through life. I can have those things, but when I'm in a setting, growing up, when I was in a setting, you can't have all these big swaths of emotion, because it was seen as aggressive or dangerous. And so I've found that away from the stage, away from the mic, that I struggle with the voice getting too hot and loud, because I'm always aware of my environment around me and scared to become the thing that they have, kind of labeled me to be, and then receive the consequences of that person and that thing.
Mhm.
And so we were just kind of, talking about some things that made me realize that about myself, and how different I need to think about my life and my approach in the work that I'm doing, and in just my life, with the recognition that God made me this way, right? He
True.
made me a passionate person. And so for my life, my whole life, it's been like, stop being so passionate. It's like, no, this is actually who God made me to be. And for me to tamp this down is actually to take away one of my superpowers that has been given to me by God. So anyway, we're talking about emotions and different things and all that stuff. But
Emotions taking me over.
oh, okay, you went to the
Did you
whole.
did you know that? So that's a Destiny's Child remake I learned
Okay, yeah,
this
yeah.
year
Oh, you're
because the
saying a
Bee
sample.
Gees sang it originally.
I didn't know that.
For anybody out there who was a Destiny Child fan back
Yes, right
then
here.
and listen to this Emotion song, I love that song. I was like, that's one of their best songs. Why is that not? My wife was like, "Oh yeah, the Bee Gees did that." I'm like, "Who are the Bee Gees?" No,
Bee
I'm just
Gees.
playing. I knew
Oh,
who
okay,
the
I
Bee
was
Gees
about to
were,
say.
but
Oh,
I didn't know that they did that song. Yeah. Anyway, who cares about that? That's just a side note.
yes. That's all right. All right. So, like, we're in the grab bag moment here. Anything in the news, Antoine, that's got you kind of things that make you say, if we can
Things that
really,
make
you were
you
talking,
go,
I was talking
hmm.
Destiny's Child. I thought I'd take it even back. Even was that who did the things that make you say home? Was that
Arsenio.
yeah, I know Arsenio, but the actual song, was that In
Oh, the
Vogue?
song.
I think,
I don't
yeah.
know. See, I'm bad about that with the older songs and who sang them.
I'm gonna look it up while you tell us
Things
what's
that make-
in your grab.
Anyway, so the big news is the whole Twitter Elon Musk. Elon Musk has swooped in and
The Musk.
saved us
Oh, he saved
from
us.
the tyranny of censored speech. Apparently, he is now the icon of free speech for many people for the
Okay.
moment, just for
Okay.
the moment, for a good part of our country.
Yeah.
Lots of celebrations were had, big smiles were exhibited after Elon Musk bought Twitter, and or it's not done, but they've come to some deal, and so now free speech can be restored. So apparently, it had been taken from us. So
Huh, okay.
and he's back, and we can now say again what we are have our rights to say. So that was in the news. I guess we should all be very excited that Elon Musk has rescued us.
Is that, I mean, I'm trying to just, try to understand, like, how does being able to speak on Twitter Thritter on Twitter.
on Twitter.
I don't even know what
That's
Thritter is.
15 years from now, man. When you don't have any teeth left, that's how you gonna say if it
Thritter.
remains.
Oh my
Oh,
gosh.
I was on that Twitter this morning. No, you're like, yeah, Paul, put your teeth
Put
in.
your
We
teeth
can't
back in.
understand
Put
what
your
you
teeth back
say.
in. But how does having a conversation, having free, how does being able to say whatever you want on Twitter have anything to do with our sort of constitutional rights of free speech? You know what I'm saying?
I think that's a great question. To ask. There's a part of me is like, why? Yeah, it's a great, so this free speech thing is interesting because it's like so many things. There's a simply sort of simplified. When I was growing up, man, even in my later teens and young 20s, I would go to conferences and different things, and you would hear people say, and they would say, "Oh, you got to use the KISS method. Keep it simple, stupid, or keep it simple, whatever the last S would be, is stupid, or keep it simple, something."
Valid.
And and
Sure.
and this was supposed to be this axiom of leadership that you would keep things simple. And I never was really a big fan of that because I often thought that things were not as simple as they appeared. And we have a keep it simple, stupid society right now. And when it comes to freedom of speech, it's probably been too simplified. I think some people seem to think that freedom of speech means that I can just say whatever I want to say without consequence anywhere. I can
Right.
say whatever I want to say anywhere, and no one can penalize me for saying it. And that's not what the legal constitutional version of freedom of speech as a right concept is. And then even if you take a second or two and just think about it, we can all come up with scenarios where you don't get to say whatever you want in a given scenario.
Sure.
And the absence of doing that is not a violation of freedom of speech. So it's just one of those things where you just kind of, where you just kind of, you're talking about it, but we're not actually talking about the thing. The problem is so many people get behind these simplified versions of things, or these outright mischaracterized versions of things, and then they run with it, and then you can't recover it because the people who are thinking are like, hey, that's not even what we're talking about. So that's the frustrating thing about the conversation. But yeah, to answer your question, I have no idea. I have no idea. There's Twitter saying that you can't say certain things on their site. Twitter putting a guidelines and a document of guidelines that you have to agree to in order to be on their platform that says we won't allow X kind of speech, Y kind of speech, these certain types of things on our platform, because our platform will not be used to for whatever reason they choose to say that. And you click agree to these terms, and then they allow you onto their platform, and then you say the thing you said you wouldn't say, and then they kick you off. That's not a constitutional free speech issue right there.
Right.
So it
Yeah,
shouldn't even be a thing, but it is.
I agree. And the simplification of it is really where it gets hard because, again, we say it all the time on the show. You know what I mean? People read the headlines, they don't read the paragraphs. And so they just go freedom of speech and they throw that out there as that means that you can't say whatever. But there's lots, I mean, there are like, uh, there are things that are not protected, if you will, by the freedom of speech aspect, right? Like, obscenities are not protected by the freedom of speech. You know what I mean? And of course, it's trying to figure out like what defining what obscenity means. Misconstrued, lying, in many circumstances is not necessarily protected by free speech, right? Getting out there and saying this is what happened and this was not happened. Fighting words, threats, inciting violence was not protected by freedom of speech. You know what I mean? And even when you go to like different schools, of learning, higher learning areas, different places of employment, like there's things you can and can't say. So it's not just the catch-all that like in any place that I go, any environment I'm in, that I get to say whatever I want to say. There are levels in which it's not protected and that censorship does happen. I think one of the big places is, that people are, I guess, trying to, from a Twitter standpoint, is I think they just want to be able to not have. I think they're just frustrated that you have this company that's was controlling it and saying what was making the definitions. But again, I just don't know how it's anything
Right.
else. Like who?
I know
It's
it.
always
I
going
mean,
to be who defines the thing as what it is, right?
sure.
Obscenity
Yeah.
is, pornography is who defines what those things are, and that's again, that's part of living in a society that's not, if I can say it like that, like a theocracy where you have sort of these very clear, um, almost eternal moral things that don't seem to change. And
Mhm.
whereas you are in a society like what we have, there is a kind of moral code that we create collectively, and I'm putting that in quotes for the listeners. But that moral code gets changed, depending on the time frame and the context and the culture, right? As we go along, it was morally okay to have slaves at one point, but that changed. And you could treat the slaves XYZ, but that changed, but there are some more of theological sort of spaces where that treatment of slaves didn't has never changed. It's always been the same thing. Yeah, in the
It's a
society,
weird. It's a. I say it's weird, but it is. I mean, like Twitter. It's like
Twizzler.
you and I were talking about Twizzler. We were talking about this. Like it's like my house. Like if you come into my house and you repeatedly, let's just say, you repeatedly call me and mine the N word. I'm just going, since we're on the race,
Sure.
the N word. Um, at some point, I'm like, bro, you gotta go. I'm kicking you out of the house. You're no longer welcomed here.
Yeah.
What you're not going to be able to do, and when you ask me why, I'm gonna say it's because you said these things, and those things are not going to be things we want said in this house, in the way that you're using them. Now, you get kicked out of my house or my party if I'm having one, and now you're going to go to the lawyer and say, hey, he violated my free speech. He kicked me out of his party because I said something, and the reason he put me out was because of what I said. Well, that's ridiculous, and all of us would agree without any. I feel like, and maybe I'm naive, I feel like in that scenario we are all in agreement that it is the right of me as a homeowner to tell
Yeah.
that person, you got to rock. Why? Because I own this place, I own this house, and the environment that I am trying to provide for the people here, I'm responsible for, and he is not helping me contribute to that environment. And so he's got to go. Twitter, same thing. It's got its product. The product doesn't belong to the people, it belongs to Twitter. And it's responsible for its product. It's got a brand that it's responsible to protect. It's got several things that it's got a product. And if it is, in my opinion, if it owns that product and you agree to some set of terms, it just owns it. If I said another one, last example on this, like I talked, Marcus, we talked about it. If you're at your church, a lot of us who are listening to this, we're church goers. If you go to your church and all of a sudden, someone stands up in the middle of the sermon and
Yeah.
starts shouting obscenities to the pastor, which we've seen happen in the past, and yelling.
It's crazy.
Yeah, just shouting and screaming. They're not dangerous. They haven't pulled out any weapons. They're just passionately yelling at the preacher and letting them know how wrong they are potentially or whatever. That person gets ushered out of the congregation,
Yeah.
and potentially out of the church altogether. Right. And again, all of us would say, yes, that's what's supposed to happen in that scenario. If we're at a musical and someone in the crowd stands up and just starts shouting and singing and saying things, security comes, picks that person up, escorts them out. These are not violations of freedom of speech.
Right.
Now if that person were to go to jail for those things, maybe. If the government were to persecute that person for that, maybe. But these individual private scenarios, they're not violations of free speech. And I just think it's a weird thing. The reason it's important is because it kind of, I hate to bring this up, Marcus, and maybe
Oh,
this is a stretch.
okay. All right.
Okay, I'm gonna soften it. So but it's a kind of privilege and exceptionalism that
Perpetuate.
reveals it's a flare of privilege and exceptionalism. You have to follow the rules, but I reserve the right to be exceptional. And my thoughts should never be consequence. There's no consequences to my thoughts, but all consequences apply to fullest extent, to you and yours.
Right.
And I say it's a flare. It's like it's not full privilege. It's one of those. It's a leak.
Okay.
It's like it shows up and it lets you know that there's something else that's underneath there, right? And I think there's a lot of that. And I'm not sure that I would say that that's all white privilege. I would
Sure.
say that's a kind of
American.
Americanized,
Yeah.
egocentric individual has all the power kind of privilege
Right.
that
Privilege.
thinks not about the full picture, but only about me and my individual self and what works for me in the moment and why that should be prioritized.
No, that makes sense. That's good. The I'm just kind of looking at the chat here, and I know it's a different topic.
Yeah, yeah. No, change. I
But I
see
see
it.
what I see, and I see Ann. Hello, Ann. Good to see you. Glad you're here. Julie, I see you put something in there. I haven't had a chance to look at that yet, but Ann is asking the question: Can you share your thoughts about the Harvard report on the legacy of slavery? Yeah, I mean, I didn't read all 100 pages of it. I think I just kind of perused through an article. So the for what I can grasp and throw anything you want. Oh, thanks, Julie, for that. Yeah, so Harvard is recognizing sort of making going to great lengths to recognize their participation in the furtherance of slavery, and so trying to make all kinds of changes and announcements and statements about the about their involvement, and I think really trying to, in some ways, I don't know, maybe this is an assumption, but I think they're definitely trying to lead the way in some of this conversation around what reparations looks like, what does confession look like, and really what does if I'm Harvard, what does it look like to really be beholden to the idea of engaging and going after the truth, which I think I read in the article. Is kind of what they said are we are in our motto, we are dedicated to truth. So I think it's this getting this truth telling out there. So I'd be interested to see what you guys are hearing and thinking about that. I'm all for confession. Antoine, I know you're against it. I know you don't like people confessing, but
Anti. No, no, I love it.
confession. I'm all for it. I'm all for trying to tell the stories that are true. I know that there are, I think, iconography, I think, from Harvard's standpoint, that they are in conversation around removing. I think there's a shield maybe in the law school that has some iconography that represents some of the history of slavery that they're looking at. Either they have removed or they are removing, naming certain buildings and things to give honor to those who were a part of the group of slaves that helped to build it. And I'm all in on that. Um, I think at the end of the day, you know, it's one thing again to pay homage, which I think is a good thing. Don't hear me saying it's not a good thing. But there are communities that have been ravished by this sort of history of slavery. Um, there's lots of folks who are sitting on quite a bit of wealth based on the blood, sweat, and tears of the African slaves. And so it is good to get the acknowledgement of it because we haven't done that. That's helpful. That's helpful for reconciliation is in the acknowledgement of it, for sure. The confession of it, because that's part of it. But the actual reconciliation means okay. So how do we actually make this right now? Now that we've confessed and owned it and seen it, how do we make this right? And so that's where I think I haven't been able to again go deeply in on what Harvard is doing. So they may have some like a a 5-tier plan of here's how we're going to make this right, and here's what we're going to do. And Harvard's been, they've done some obviously critical race theory actually came out of this this institution, right? And so bringing
Oop,
some of those things up.
sorry about that.
What are you bringing stuff up?
Yeah, well, I was going to say there's a short article by NPR that we could probably just read real quick.
Okay.
It's relatively short, and it might give us a common background. I didn't expect it would pop up immediately on on the share, but I was preparing it to share it. So
put it in the chat for me over here so I can take a look.
Yeah, it's in the chat. It's
is that the one
the one I just posted there.
Oh, okay, perfect.
But yeah, I'm gonna pop it up for a second because that way we can kind of work right off of it. If people can see it,
I don't know if they can see it. I can't see it.
I'm gonna zoom in a little bit.
Okay, I was gonna say I don't have
and
my other glasses on. You know what I'm saying?
Well, I'm needing it more and more. Okay, so here's an NPR report, which I feel like is pretty central. It's not a particularly biased source.
Gosh, people are not going to buy that.
We do the best we can. It's not
sure.
So. Harvard releases report detailing its ties to slavery, plans to issue reparations. This is April 27th when it was published.
Okay.
Yeah, right. So Harvard University has released a report detailing the school's involvement in the U.S. slave trade, including faculty and staff owning slaves and professors teaching racial eugenics. In 2019, Harvard President Lawrence Bacow formed a committee that included representatives from all the schools on campus and asked them to uncover Harvard's ties to slavery. The committee's work should, quote, have a grounding in rigorous research and critical perspectives that will inform not only our understanding of facts, but also how we might address the ramifications of what we learn, end quote, he said at the time. The committee found that Harvard faculty and staff enslaved 70 people from the school's founding in 1636 to the banning of slavery in Massachusetts in 1783. Some of those who were enslaved lived on campus and were responsible for providing care for Harvard's presidents, professors, and students. Additionally, the report discovered many of the university's donors profited directly from the slave trade in the 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries. Some used labor from enslaved people in the Caribbean and the American South. Others obtained their wealth from selling goods to plantations. Donors in the textile industry sourced cotton that was grown by enslaved persons. During the first half of the 19th century, more than a third of the money donated or promised to Harvard by private individuals came from just 5 men who made their fortunes from slavery and slave-produced commodities, the report said. The university also, end quote on that. The university also heavily supported the study of eugenics, the concept of encouraging selective breeding for the purpose of purifying the human race. Dudley Allen Sargent, director of Harvard's Hemingway Gymnasium from 1879 to 1919, quote, implemented a physical education program that involved intrusive physical examinations, anthropometric measurement, and the photographing of unclothed Harvard and Radcliffe students, end quote, according to the study. This last little section here says the school has made a plan to administer some form of reparations.
I'm interested.
Harvard outlined several next steps it said it would take in an attempt to atone for its involvement in the slave trade, including monetary reparations for Black and Indigenous students who are descendants of the enslaved persons in the U.S.
Wow.
The profound, quote, the profound harm caused by the university's entanglements with slavery and its legacies cannot be valued in monetary terms alone, end quote, the study said. Quote, nevertheless, financial expenditures are a necessary predicate to and foundation for redress, end quote. The legacy of slavery fund will be kept in an endowment, quote, strategically invested to support implementation of these recommendations, end quote, the report said. The Ivy League school also plans to further partner with historically Black colleges and universities, HBCUs, through initiatives such as appointing visiting HBCU professors to Harvard for 1 year and
Wow.
subsidizing summer, semester, or year-long studies at Harvard for HBCU students. The school said it is working to identify Black and Indigenous students who are direct descendants of people enslaved in the U.S. Quote, we further recommend that in recognition of this lineage, the university engage with these descendants through dialogue, programming, information sharing, relationship building, and educational support, it said. The recommendations will be evaluated through annual reports.
Wow. So many. Look, if you're on the chat, chime in. What did you hear? What are some things that you what did you grab? What did you like? What did you not like? That kind of thing. Um, I thought there was so many interesting. There's so many things to kind of think through from a model understanding, right? They talked about bringing together a committee, right, to even start to think about it. And this is one of the things I know that Ta-Nehisi Coates has been, since he wrote his sort of seminal work on, reparations. I think it was back in 2012 or whatever. But talking about the fact that although reparations is a difficult and very time consuming aspect,
Complicated. Yeah.
complicated issue. The one thing that I think in his article that I read originally, he said, I'm not even telling you what it's supposed to be, but we should at least bring a committee together to start to work on it. Like if there's some kind of possibility or some kind of brainstorm that we need to do to even think through what the possibilities might be, let's at least create a committee, which is something that people were fighting against even then, because again, it's too quote unquote complicated. So bringing the committee is one of those things that I thought was really good and really utilizing the facts. I think I'd be interested, and maybe they kept better records. You know what I mean, of
Mm,
slavery in sort of the North. I know when we've tried to kind of go down our DNA pathway, we'll have these blocks. You know what I mean, because there wasn't record, or the record wasn't clean because names weren't used. It was just property, right? So it was just like the property, they were mentioned in the livestock occasionally. And so you had to it's just hard to maneuver and find where relatives were. So I'm curious about that, of the facts and things like that. So I've got a lot of things that I wrote down in here, but I want to get some banter in there. What did you, as you were reading, or you may be like me, like when I'm reading it, I can't process it the same way
mm.
I'm hearing
Well,
somebody.
I thought it was interesting that there were I thought it was interesting that they were willing to hold themselves they were willing to respond to the fact that the donations they received from other people
Yeah.
were from people who largely benefited. And it would be easy for them to say, listen, we didn't do anything. We didn't have a whole lot to do with slavery. We just received donations. And
Right.
they did have some stuff that they said that was on campus for them
Sure.
too.
Right.
But I thought it was an interesting addition to their calculus that, hey, we also realized that much of the donations that we got, particularly this one we're talking about from these 5 guys,
1/3 of their.
um, yeah, like 1/3 of their, and they're saying that has nothing to do with them,
Yeah.
particularly directly, and yet they recognize that they have benefited from slavery through that proxy, and that that thinking is in there, and um, I think that's an interesting facet, and I think it's helpful. I think it can be helpful, and then it can certainly complicate things for other people going forward because it widens the scope for um, what you consider when you think about reparations, not just what you did directly, but what ways you benefited indirectly, you know?
Yeah, and that's the piece, right? I think that's what we're in this moment kind of talking about now is there are ways in which we see the definite, string of connection being directly associated, your family being directly associated with slavery, but then there are the privileges of it, right? The benefits that the society had as a whole, just to even, certain aspects of what you were able to, you didn't make the clothes, you know what I mean? You didn't pick the cotton that made the clothes, but you sold the clothes, you know what I mean? And so your
Right.
family owned J.C. Penney, and although they didn't make the clothes, they were just a distributor of the clothes. Like your family made money off of cotton, which you could do that all over the world because cotton was so potent
Sure.
and so
Sure.
popular. Uh,
Sure.
but I
And
love,
that kind of makes it it becomes, if it
More
gets
complicated.
too right,
Yeah,
right, and that makes it become too. I think that's how some people would say, well, how do we even quantify that? You know, and it leads people to a place of inaction because they feel like it's way too complicated of an approach to take. And I like your comment too, because this
yeah,
is also what I was thinking, which is this makes me think this is what so many of our Christian denominations need to do: a rigorous unearthing of the facts, a clear apology, and recommendations for action. Interesting that they use the word atone.
yeah. I noticed
Yeah.
that word atonement
Um,
there too. A secular, and in many Christian contexts, a an enemy organization.
yeah.
When you start talking about Ivy League academia, like
Yeah.
that's the enemy organization. That's ultimately taking away uh, all Christian thought processes and filling your head with all kinds of mess. So to use that
Yeah.
word atone is really powerful.
Yeah. I appreciate the approach. Now I want to see it in action. You know,
Yeah,
I want to see where it leads. But um, thinking through a financial aspect, but not starting or stopping necessarily with the financial, but also making a relationship with HBCUs, trying to appropriately uh, associate the right benefactors of that reparation. You know, they mentioned that they were looking to try to figure out a way to figure out who were the descendants of slaves.
yeah,
And I think that's probably to make sure that the reparations go to those peoples who were truly the progenitors of that. And um yeah, and yes, I'm with you, man. The confess, it's unfortunately people are just going to see this and they're going to call it quote unquote woke mess.
yes.
And somehow reconciliation is wokeness. And
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 it's man, it's frustrating
and
because
again, this goes back to the simple. Let's go back to what we were talking about earlier. The keep it simple, stupid method
yeah,
is to make woke bad,
right,
period. And therefore, anything that has to do with rights or corrections or race or anything in a particular category automatically just gets thrown into this category and then it's done.
right.
Yeah, and that's unfortunate. The counter to this, of course, and you can comment on this Harvard thing market, but the counter to this is Jamar Tisby's run into some issues with Grover City University and them basically telling him saying that they made a mistake by bringing him on a couple of years ago, and him getting a bunch of flack over his talk about critical race theory way before critical race theory was so mainstream in our politics. So we have Harvard talking about reparations. We have the Christian organization Grover City University, I think it is, or something like that, going the opposite direction. And it's an interesting contrast.
Right, and that's where I think, yeah, that's a frustrating piece. But I think what's been great with Harvard is they've been able to, at least what they're giving us, a kind of model that we can try. You know what I mean? And again, you never want, and I'm with Ann too. Like I was like, I wish the church would lead out on this, right?
Right.
Because a kind of faith rooted approach to reparations confession is going to be, I think, a safer road, because at the end of the day, they are taking into account the power of God in the midst of it, right? So they're thinking very theologically about the nature of God and what would be the dignifying thing in the midst of it. That's what the church should be doing. They have the power of prayer. They're literally trying to bring God into the space so that as they go down the road, they have the power of God going forward with them. They see the people as whole people, which I know other people do too, but because people are made in the image of God, and that's again a faith rooted sort of space, that when they approach people, they have the ability to think about this holistically as opposed to just in a financial way. And again, Harvard's not thinking about this, I don't think, just financially either, but I think the church really utilizing some of its very unique skills and gifts about humanity and what it thinks about, could give a lot of really good holistic thought process to the idea of reparation that's very biblical and theological at the same time. I do like that they were talking about money. Again, money becomes sort of the space where people, when they talk about reparations, they tend to lean on. And they mentioned, yeah, that might, some people say, well, just throw it out. He's like, no, this is a necessary thing. I think that that's part of what I thought was really interesting, that they want to do that. But then also this sort of sharing their label, if you will. I was having a conversation the other day with somebody about the idea of diversity, equity, inclusion, and how does that work in hiring and things of that nature. And they were saying, our company hires the best of the best. So we're looking at the Harvards, we're looking at the Yales, we're looking at the Cornells and things, and the TCUs. I just threw that in.
One of these don't
What is
belong
this?
here.
Yeah, easy. So we're looking at those spaces, and if you're, again, if you don't have that sort of pedigree, then you're not getting the look. And so partnering with an HBCU, which, the HBCUs do some really good work. They've got some great students in there that are, probably able, if you will, to get into the Harvard level as well, but maybe didn't have the networks and the connections and the pedigree, if you will, to do it. But when you put them in a situation where they can go and study at Harvard for a particular length of time, what that does is it allows that to now be put on their resume. So now they have this seal, a Harvard seal that goes along with them, along with their education and their, at the Howards and Fisks and all those things. But they are sharing sort of their they're sharing their prestige with others, and that gives people a leg up in the place. That's because it's really, again, a lot of what the growth of human flourishing is in this particular country has been associated with networks. Who when you go to school, when you get out, who do you know, and what positions of power are they in? If you start to get in and you're able to study at Harvard for any length of time, and you're able to kind of create some networks, then when you get out, you have opened up the network to build into and to tap into some of that wealth that's kind of floating around amongst certain groups and certain families. So I thought that was a really helpful thing too. So, but again, I think the church getting into this situation will offer a lot more variety that deals with the whole person and deals with the reconciliation and reparations in a very uh, God
I
centered.
mean, at least we should be.
Well, yeah,
If
we
we can
have the
if we
tools
can
to
get
do
away
it.
from arguing with ourselves, which we've one step forward, five steps back. It feels sometimes, on this. I love, but check this out. I mean, I think I love this. Ann says maybe this is an opportunity for Threaded to create a God-centered template for a denomination to do this kind of work. That's
Yeah.
actually kind of interesting. What I
Yeah.
mean, a call to Harvard is not difficult. Like somebody's doing this, and so like I like this
Get
idea.
in on that committee and
I
to go,
like
"Can
this.
you sit
Well, I
in?"
mean, I like the idea that there's someone who's reputable and has the means to do things like help track, like implement, like the very practical implementation. They're in this practical implementation looks like stage where they're trying to
Uh-huh.
put things together to do that. They may be having a template that we could get in and learn from, and and bring to people, because a lot of the conversation is like, well, as you know, Marcus, it's like, well, what do we do next, or
Right.
what's my next step, or what have you. And because if people are looking for these practical next steps, maybe there's a way, maybe there's a process to do.
Well, yeah,
That'd be interesting.
yeah, I think it's similar to handling any major systemic issue in any particular city. You've got lots of different ways to approach it, you know what I mean? And one of them is this sort of community organizing space, right? Where you are pulling together different gift sets. I guess it's more community development, but putting together different gift sets together to try to solve the problem with the assets that you have. And when you do that, you want to having the sector, if you will, of the church involved brings a whole nother unique set of gifts to the conversation. So to me, like if there was any sort of conversation or action to be had based on what Ann is talking about, is to somehow get in the room with the folks at Harvard and go, look, what benefits does somebody from the Christian sector bring to that conversation at Harvard, and then what benefits does the conversation from that secular academia at Harvard bring to the conversation for Christianity and denominations? So, yeah, I think creating a template like that would be amazing.
Hmm. I'm very interested in. There's part of me thinking that through, man. Because Marcus has got his superpower of just finding himself into rooms, so it would not be beyond the pale to imagine that 6 months from now, Marcus is talking with the Harvard committee, and he's in the room somehow. Like, I don't know, you that is your superpower. I don't know how those things happen, but you are able to do that, and it's so. I
My
do.
brain is working on it right now.
I
Like,
know.
it's just
I
like,
think both of our brains are sitting here like, because there's something really. I keep talking about. We're having these conversations, and I think where we're stuck is there's a good amount of people who like agree that problems do need to be solved, but there's not a clear pathway for how to practically, legitimately solve them, in such a way that the conversations can stop.
right.
And we're now no longer talking about the existence of problems, but we're now talking about how we're solving those problems. And man, that would be a really cool, to be able to sort of carve a pathway there would be really interesting. That's something to think about, for certain. I said Grover City earlier with regard to the Jamar Tisby thing. Is Grove City. I stand corrected. Grove City College. And if you're unfamiliar with that story, they had him come and speak in 2019, I think it was. No, 2020. And they officially published something that said, that was a mistake to have him come and speak, and that they remain a. I'm looking at a article here. They remain a Christ-centered conservative institution. Is what
Because he
they
makes
is
them
what
go
they
away
said.
from that.
Yeah, yeah.
I can
It couldn't
compromise
it,
that.
it couldn't be just Christ-centered institution.
Yeah,
Which
sure.
we need that extra.
I'm interested.
But
I look, I haven't heard what
Christ-centered
it's I haven't heard what
conservative.
he said. I
Yeah,
haven't heard.
well, I did. He did post he posted his
He
whole
did.
talk for you to go and listen to. And yeah, they said that he promoted, quote, CRT concepts
There it
and
is.
characterized inviting CRT concepts. Um, and so now is they're not going woke thing. So they reverse course on Jamar Tisby. So the Christian organization is worried about going woke. The secular organization is trying to figure out how to repair and redress, um, problems.
Yeah,
And
huh.
something about the world is upside down when that happens.
But all right, but 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 is it? You know what I mean? Like I'm trying to just it's devil's advocate, right?
Yes, it is. No, go ahead.
I'm just trying to figure right because what I know, and this is how life is. There are plenty of things in Harvard's thought processes in history that I would look at and go, yeah, I'm not down with that. You know what I'm saying? Because like I said earlier, like the motivations of it, although they would probably say early on in the school's history, the motivations had a moral, a Christian sort of Judeo-Christian, movement. I would say now that that's not something that's in their top three things they're trying to hit. As far as targets, like does this follow after the Judeo-Christian sort of space? So what is it that's motivating them to have this conversation? And if it's not a a religious, I'm not even say religious, I'll say Christian, a Christian space, a Christian motivation, then what is that motivation? And should we be leery of it? Are we walking down a pathway that looks good, but it's leading us to the point
Destruction.
of destruction, right? Like
Um,
I'm just asking the question because
yeah.
you would think that because it's the illogicalness of it is you would think that we would be in lockstep with the Christians, right? The Christian organizations and institutions, and out of step with the secular institutions, right? And yet, as we hear them both talk, we feel this move based on not just a feeling, I would say, but based on even thinking through the nature of God and even the scriptures, the mission of God, that we go, gosh, I feel like Harvard is talking about something that's actually closer to the mission and the nature of God than what Grove City College is talking about. And but Grove City Colleges, these are my brothers and sisters in Christ. Like, so what's happening here? You see what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
yeah, I do. I think it'd be an interesting interview with Harvard folks to ask that question. You know, why are you doing this? What's the win for you? And even the cynic says,
Right,
well, Harvard's doing it because it's got to be some benefit for them in this. Like, what are they winning in this?
right.
Maybe some goodwill by, but it's
It's
goodwill by
Harvard.
people. Yeah,
It's
it's
Harvard. Like,
goodwill by people who are not their normal constituents.
exactly.
So
Or maybe there are normal constituents, this new young generation that's coming in, and we've seen it, right? Because Derek Bell, this is part of who one of the fathers of critical race theory, right? Like he was fighting Harvard a lot about their hiring practices, and even left Harvard when they didn't do something they were supposed to. Went to the East Coast or went to the West Coast and came back to Harvard. A lot of the critical race theory kind of rolls out of Harvard, so maybe their constituency is actually a bit more in this lane than
you know
not.
that could be it too. You know, this whole CRT thing arose out of Harvard, and they
True.
could be defending themselves in their honor. I guess
Get
they're
the
on
headline.
double down. They're like, well, we did the right thing here. So it's all that's all speculative, right? It's be good interview. Somebody should interview them uh, to see what is the motivation behind it, because but 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 more than that is, why is the church so anti that? Why are so many organizations not that? Which we could talk about that at another time. That's a big heavy conversation, because the thing that's not right about this is the church's point of view. We actually don't expect that Harvard would behave the other direction. We don't expect
Which
that
is
they
why
would be
maybe
like,
we're so overwhelmed and, like,
yeah,
surprised.
yeah. Like, it's actually, when it's not, when Harvard is doing what they're doing, we're like, okay, well, they're doing that. We wish they weren't leading that. They seem to be taking all the risks right now, and the Christians should be the ones who are bringing their influence to this conversation, and moving this ball forward. And we're the ones. So many of our voices, not all of us, so many of our voices are trying its darndest to not do anything about this, or to ignore it, or to dismiss it, or to dismantle the complaint.
Right.
Um, and and we're, like I said, we're baptizing that effort to say that this is God's way to respond to this. God is anti woke, and therefore anything under woke is now a spiritual battle that we have to fight against. And I think that's the way it's kind of turning in. And that is disheartening, and
Mm.
it is upside down. It is very weird. If you were to sit down and say a power-based block of people versus a reconciliation-based people, how would they
Which
how
one
would
is which?
which one would act this way or that way? And then you see these results. You'd have to either say that your ideas about power and reconciliation are off, or these people aren't actually reconciliation based, or power, like,
Mhm.
something has to reconcile this picture. And it's such an odd thing. But
Mm.
anyway, yeah.
Yeah. Well, man, we've covered lots of different things. There's one more thing I'm curious about, because it was an article I saw. I think you saw it this week as well. BYU's been getting a lot of smoke the last couple of weeks, or last week probably, in lots of different areas. But one is a group of African Americans on their campus. They call themselves the Black Menaces. Menaces? Menace? I don't know what the Well, Menace. Yeah,
The
whatever it is,
NPCs.
Black Menace. Uh, the black people make up less than 1% of BYU's BYU student body, and they want to bring some attention to that and the ways that the religious organization has engaged with African Americans historically, and so they're bringing some of that. And so they call them. So TikTok is where they kind of got found and are utilizing TikTok to kind of do that. And so they corner students on campus and ask them different questions about Black history and about Black people and things of that nature, and kind of put it out on TikTok for people to engage with, whatever that means. And so I don't know. When I was reading the article, I was just trying to figure out like what do I think about this situation? Any thought?
Well. All I can say is we know documented that there's lots in the Mormon religion that is racist, and it's just racist. It's just so that part is so this is weird. I'm gonna say this, and it'll sound like a joke, but it's not meant to be a joke. But I think it could. Like I didn't know that Black people were at BYU. I mean, like in Utah, like I do think Black people are in Utah.
They have a football team.
Yeah, I do. I mean, it's true, I guess. Yeah, but I mean, there's a part of me that's like BYU is so associated with Mormonism.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
And I
You
don't
don't
know
know any
that
Black women?
many Black Mormons.
Wait, no, don't even say it like that. You said you don't know that many. Do you know any?
I don't know any.
Okay, just say it outright. You don't
I mean,
know
but
any.
I'm trying to hold that maybe I do. I just don't know that I know them.
That's a fair. Okay, that's a fair.
But
You
I
do know
don't
one.
know.
You know of one.
I know that whenever I'm visited at my door by Mormons,
Yeah,
they are white guys.
yeah. You haven't had the ladies come by yet?
I haven't.
Okay.
Well, there was one because the ladies can't talk to you according to their thing, so they have to stay back. So I did have a situation where it's never just a lady by herself.
Yeah, right.
So it was like two guys and a lady. But anyway, so that's the first thought. Again, it sounds like a joke, but it's a legitimate thought. Like I'm like, who's Black at BYU? And then the second thing is on what on what part of Mormonism are you standing that you should have anything? I don't know Mormonism well enough that there's enough contradiction in its
When you say that you should have anything, who should have?
Black people so as Christians I can come in and I say, listen, your Bible says this Bible says this,
Right.
and therefore you've treated Black people this way, and but their holy book, one of their editions is John Smith stuff, and in that is some very racist things. So
yeah, it's and the namesake of the university is actually the one that is notorious for his stance on African Americans, and really put the African American piece into the lexicon, if you will, and practices of Mormonism. Brigham Young was notorious for basically they're saying the black people couldn't receive the priesthood, and the priesthood was necessary to be a part of the upper the highest level of heaven. There are let's see, 1, 2, 3. I think four.
Okay.
I think there's like 4, but then there's like an outer darkness that doesn't. It's kind of balancing out. But all that to say, a Black person couldn't get that priesthood moniker, so you couldn't get kind of the full treasures, if you will. I think the planets and the wives and all those kinds of good things that go along that most people probably don't even know about Mormonism, but that's kind of the sort of afterlife experience of it. And in 1978, that particular rule was turned over. So the hard part about it is the prophet is supposedly a voice of God, right? So whatever he says is God saying it, unless he articulates, this is me saying it, right? Particularly when he makes announcements about things that are very spiritual, like the Blacks can't have the priesthood. That's God saying it. And then in 1978, the prophet had to say, God said now that black people can receive the priesthood. So there's this weird sort of now dance they have to do going, wait, God said, 100 years ago that black people couldn't, and now God's changing his mind.
Mm.
So there's a dance that always has to happen, and I know the dance because they come to my house and we have this conversation when they come to my house. I love them, right? I grew up around Mormons. Some of my best friends growing up were Mormons. Some people I still love very dearly are Mormons, and I've had this conversation with them as well. So this isn't me kind of having a conversation away from them. This has been one of the big pieces I struggled with as I was being um, many times recruited, if you will, into Mormonism by several loved ones. And so that was the big piece. And to your point, there's where Mormonism would say is that yes, the Book of Mormon is the most perfect. They would call it the most perfect of any book, but it's built on the narratives of the Bible, right? The Jesus that they are talking about, who came and had a whole life over here in America, is supposedly the same Jesus from the Bible. In fact, great chunks of the Book of Mormon have been taken out of the Bible almost verbatim, which is another problem that they have that we don't have time to get into. But the idea is that the founding book ultimately then really would be the Bible. And when they come to your door, they're going to talk to you about the Book of Mormon. They're going to talk about the Bible. But if you talk to them, you'll see that they have read the Book of Mormon and don't really get into the Bible all that much, which leads them to some of the thoughts that they have that are inconsistent with things like Black people. And so it is a fair question to ask. Is there a large Black population at BYU based on everything that Brigham Young, the namesake, said about Black people? You wouldn't expect Black people to be there, but I guess if and I don't think these Black people are like athletes either. I don't know. I haven't hunted them down to see like what they're doing there. I don't know why they would be there. A lot of Polynesians make their way into because of some of the work that they're doing in the islands over there. So, but ultimately, so part of it to me is why I'm a little frustrated with this situation it, is a what are you doing there, right? If I'm a Black person, I'm talking to the Black ministers, Black at BYU. I'm going, what are you doing there? Is what I don't like. I don't know if I am. It's kind of like I know this is a stretch. I'm just gonna go ahead. I know this is a stretch. I know that the BYU is not this extreme, but I'm just trying to create a symbol, right? Like if there was a KKK rally and Black people were there complaining that the KKK does not want anything to do with them, right? Or they don't have a large diversity, I would be saying, what do you expect? Now, most people who are of the LDS now would say, Marcus, you're going too far. LDS loves Black people. Here's a great articles. I've been sent all those articles from my good friends. I get it. But when you have a history where God, your God, says that Black people are not not able to receive all the benefits of heaven, it's a hard one to come off of for the Black people. Now, Gladys Knight had no problem. She opened up the temple that was built in my neighborhood in Houston. She was the opening act at that temple because she is a Mormon, an LDS, excuse me. So
There you go. See,
so
I do know one.
there you go.
Or at least
That's
know
what I
of
said.
one.
You know of one, right? And I had one in my high school that was there for a little while. I'm not sure if he's still a part of it or not. But the question I do have is, what are you doing at
Yeah,
BYU?
that's kind of. I think that's you've articulated what you put you. Yeah, that's exactly kind of what I was thinking without figuring out the way to say that. But that's exactly like, well, what are you doing there? What did you think? It's the reason I like to stay inside, because if I go to the jungle, there are things in the jungle that I don't want to be messed with, and I don't want to mess with, and I don't want to mess with me. And so what am I doing in the jungle if I or on a hike if I don't want to be bothered with hike like things? So and they don't want to be bothered with me. They not well,
Well, that's the piece too. They don't. And this is what's frustrating to me about the situation is that they're cornering people and asking them things they know good and well these folks don't know nothing about, right? And then they're putting it on TikTok, which now is exposing, how whatever their followership, which could be hundreds, thousands, whatever, millions, and embarrassing folks about their naivete. And who likes that? How is that a promotion for more diversity? Wait, you want me to bring more people like you here to embarrass more of the folks who are paying all of our bills? I don't think that that's
Yeah,
happening.
they're not going to do that.
No, so
That
I think the approach is not helpful for whatever they're
yeah.
trying to accomplish. I don't think the approach is helpful.
That said, I did put an article. I put a link in the description. I mean, in the chat. If you're still here and interested in this part of the conversation, magazine.byu.edu. So it's an official BYU link. And the article is Black at BYU, and they go through and looks like it's a um, thought through and well crafted reading experience. I haven't read it, but it doesn't look like it's some haphazardly thrown together thing. It
Sure. It's in the
looks like
magazine, BYU.
these really great pictures of people of color, and it's not short. And so underneath it, we have ethnic peacemaking on the wings of diversity, intersections of identity. These are other articles. So perhaps BYU as an institution is taking some stride in
Good
this
push.
direction. But it's an interesting bit.
Yeah, I know that they are trying to get away from that history, as many people in this country are trying to get away. I mean, we're talking about Harvard, you know what I mean? Uh,
Yeah.
I think it'd be interesting to see. I'd love to, follow up with that. I know they're trying to get away from the history. I know my friends are sending me things like, "Hey, look, here's a black LDS and their story. You got to read." So I'd be interested to see what they're trying to do in similar ways as Harvard is trying to do in engaging with this conversation with confession, and then a kind of I don't know if you can call it a reparation. I mean, like how many people of color died between Brigham Young in 1978 that now get into heaven. I guess you could talk to Joseph Smith and maybe he can put a.
See, you got to get it. See, now you're into that. I can't see. That's the part I can't get too much. I can't get too much into it. I don't know a whole lot about it.
Oh yeah,
But
I know
the heavens and
there is a baptism of the dead,
yeah,
in which you can in the afterlife. Those who are in the afterlife who maybe didn't choose Mormonism, you can go to the temple and baptize their names so that they have an opportunity.
yeah.
That's I think they actually got.
Are you still white? Do you keep anyway? It's a whole different thing.
There's lots of
Like
questions.
was in
Yes.
the afterlife we got Revelations 3, right? So, but do we have this picture? Like, is it still does
What?
color matter? Their
What
culture
in the
matter
what
in the second and third heaven or whatever.
yeah. These are questions. I'm gonna do some research on that. I don't know how they
Don't
deal with
spend too much time on it. Is
I'm
what I'm
not. I'm
saying.
not. I got. It's like I told the nice 18-year-old elders that came to my door. When they were talking about the idea that maybe God, just was that God was opening the door up, and he had a reason for kind of closing or for having it closed in back in Brigham Young's time, and he's opening up in 78, and that's God. We don't understand it. And I was like, well, the problem that I have is that God opened the door for all people back in when Jesus came on the cross, right?
Right.
Like that's when he opened the door. So ultimately, and if you want to hear from a racial standpoint, you should read Ephesians,
Yeah.
4. And they're like, and I was like, have Ephesians 4? Like, well, we don't really read the Bible all that much. I was like, okay, so start here. Let me just give you some Bible stuff, and then let's come back and talk. Needless to say, they haven't come back to the door since I gave
No, you
names
are
to
not
people.
a person of peace.
I was peaceful about it. You
No,
can
no, but by the
but I'm
definition,
not
yeah,
yeah, I'm not
like
I'm not one to spend your time on. Like if you
yeah,
got
yeah.
your ROI
The
is like
bosom
how
didn't
many people.
burn.
Yeah,
On the
there it
Indian.
is. Yes, I had
So
no burning in the bosom, so I had none of that. So
yeah.
uh,
Well,
yeah, I mean,
good conversations, and Julie, thank you so much for contributing to the conversation. If we are able to make a connection with Harvard, and I am 60 to 70% serious about thinking that through.
that's a heavy
Um,
percentage.
I know that I am, because I think I'm trying to figure out how to animate people who are on board and get them excited and encouraged that progress can be made. And I think it's a lot of people. And so anything that helps do that, anything that helps us say, man, it's doable, y'all. Look.
Right.
You know, like, and
Model. You need a model.
yeah, here's a model. Let's do it. It's
At least
been
try.
done. It's been done by in a significant way. I think stories like that will encourage people. People are looking for something to get on to, get to ride on as moving forward. So if we can somehow jump on a little bit of that train, and even if they're not doing it for great reasons, if they come up with really great models, there's no reason why we can't reverse engineer that and figure out a way to bring it to our denominations. A denominational conversation, you go to the Southern Baptist Convention and you say, hey, here's a way to do this based on the Harvard model. Who knows what
Who
could happen?
knows? Who knows? Well, like we do, we try to give these great perspectives and to look at the things around us, the Christianity, culture, race, from lots of different lenses. That's why we call ourselves Colored Commentary. You guys are a part of that, and we're grateful that you're able to join us. And so, as you go back out into your world, look through these lenses and stay colored.